Hello and welcome to the Open Era podcast. My name is Devang. This week, Simon and I are off, so we decided to revisit the women's 2004 Australian Open final to talk about one of the more underrated rivalries in tennis. Clijsters and Justine Henin-Hardenne were the top players in the women's game and happened to hail from the same small nation, Belgium. Combined, they would win 11 Grand Slams. On this January day in Melbourne, they battled for hardcourt supremacy. We talk about the early aughts, the late 90s, and forward. Much of that conversation was rightfully dominated by the Williams sisters, but there were so many good players plying their trade at this time, including these two Belgians who had wicked games of their own. Simon and I really enjoyed looking back at this final. Specifically, I think we just really loved the Australian Open, and especially what matches it produced in this time period of tennis. So join us on this look back. And a reminder, we are on twitter.com/open era pod. Also patreon.com/open era. Join us there, get the show ad free, get it early on Sundays. Plus join us on the Discord where we're chatting tennis all the time. We'll be back with you next week to talk everything Wimbledon as the year's third major gets underway. Hello and welcome to the Open Era podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined as always by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush and I returned to taking a walk down memory lane, and we returned to Melbourne in Australia in 2004 and a battle of the two best players at that time, Bush, and it was two people from Belgium of all countries.
It was the heyday of Henin and Clijsters. Really were dominating the world of tennis at that point. They were 1 and 2 in the world, and it was really, really genuinely enjoyable to go back and watch these two players. I believe they were just 20 and 21 years of age when they were playing, and it was really, really fantastic. I'm on record as saying some pretty outlandish things about Justine Henin in terms of how good I think she is, and if she's in a slightly bigger and stronger body that holds up to a tour and the amount of tournaments that are being played, I think she goes down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. So get ready for some hyperbole if you like that sort of thing. And if not, the whole match is available. We watched the Daily Motion version of it. If you can watch it through the Lego brick levels of quality it is in terms of the pixels that you can see, but it's well worth going and checking out.
If you're on the fence about listening to this episode, I'm telling you now, it's worth it alone for Bush's wild claims about how good Justine Henin-Hardenne was. Justine Henin-Hardenne at the time, he makes some bold claims, so I would listen to it. Bush, this was your recommendation. What led you to making that pick?
Tons of great storylines coming into this one, and I think we in the tennis world at the start of this year had seen the comeback of Clijsters, and she'd played a few matches, which was very cool to see. And we don't really talk about Justine Henin a whole lot, just given her stature in the game and what she achieved and the fact that she retired twice. And this was number 1 versus number 2 in the world. The world number 1 ranking was on the line coming into it. They'd played each other twice previously in Grand Slam finals. There was a lot at stake in this, and it was also an incredible final. The shot making was absolutely astonishing, and there was all sorts of great things to talk about, so I'm very excited to get into it.
The background for this match coming in, Serena, the reigning champion, is absent due to a knee injury. Venus Williams, who was a finalist the year before as well, a favorite, dropped in the third round by Open Era favorite Lisa Raymond.
Friend of the pod, actually, Lisa Raymond.
Friend of the pod. Totally, the other background, totally forgot Kim Clijsters and Lane Hewitt were a thing, and that Kim Clijsters was called Aussie Kim because she was adopted.
That is the other storyline coming into this one, right? The very pro crowd, the very pro Australian crowd, and yeah, she was beloved, and Leighton Hewitt's in the box for this match as well, which is kind of cool to see.
So I think the key thing in terms of this rivalry was that they were both from Belgium, a very small country, especially in terms of the tennis world, in which I think today it's like we think of David Goffin on the men's side, but it really was Kim Clijsters and Justine Henin putting Belgium on the map. But I guess the idea was that because they were so good and from such a close-knit tennis community, it would be a question of whether they got along or not, because everyone knows tennis people love drama. But it seems like they did at the beginning, and then a change in Henin's coaching style and how serious she was taking the sport led her to kind of remove friends from her personal circle as a player. At least that's what Clijsters said. But Bush, there was also this pretty serious insinuation made by Clijsters' father that definitely added to the bad blood.
Yeah, and we will never know, but it's certainly a wild accusation to throw at someone on the basis that Kim Clijsters' father accused Justine Henin of doping, of specifically talking about the size of her arms. One of the things that was very apparent in the early career of Justine Henin is you can just look at her when she's on the tennis court. She's a very petite woman. And it was one of the things when she was 19, when she was 20 years old, before she really got up to the top of the game. She competed at the latter stages of tournament, but oftentimes her body broke down. And this was a thing that continued throughout her career and continued to plague her. But she was a very slight woman. She had a very slight frame to her. And this was something that really held her back in the early stages of her career. She worked incredibly hard at it by all accounts. And anyone who discusses this mentions the fact that she was incredible in the weight room, incredible just putting on size and strength to be able to compete against some players who are, in a lot of ways, she's giving up a whole foot to some of the people that she's playing against. She's giving up a good 30 pounds in muscle to some of the players, the top end of the game players that she's playing against. But this was an outrageous accusation which got labeled against her, and one which certainly added to the rivalry and certainly added fuel to this fire.
It's a hell of a thing to just throw around, right? Without zero proof, just to label someone like that. So yeah.
Well, how many times did Nick Kyrgios use the needle emoji to Rafael Nadal as well? So these things are not taken kindly by professional athletes, especially when those athletes protest continuously that they're clean. And when you see the likes of Lance Armstrong and Barry Bonds and all the other people that have fallen from grace, of if you mention that word and the doping word around an athlete, it's a death knell for their career. So it's not a good thing to be associated with at all.
At the time, Jennifer Capriati was trying to start a thing calling them the Belgian sisters, as akin to the Williams sisters, which is a terrible nickname with no creativity. And on the men's side at this time as well, it was very interesting times. Roger Federer had just taken over as world number one after beating Juan Carlos Ferrero in the semifinals. And Fed would beat Murat Safin in the final there as well. I think Murat Safin had played something like 20 hours of total match time before he got to that final. But yeah,
I think it was the most amount of sets on court ever in the Australian Open in the Open era to get to the final, which is kind of cool to see actually. And it had to be Murat Safin as well, didn't it? Someone who just did it the hard way. And someone who was blessed with unbelievable talent, but still someone else did it the hard way.
So that's where we were at in 2004. It's a pretty seismic shift on the men's side. And obviously we didn't know then, but Federer taking number one for the first time would be a historic moment for the sport in general. And on the women's side, the Williams sisters were there and they were a dominant force as well. But Serena's absence, Venus going out early, and Clijsters and Henin both coming in on fantastic form. I mean, they were finalists at the last major that was played.
Can we just touch on one other thing before we get into the match? Because I think it's really valuable to chat about, is the fact that Justine Henin and Kim Clijsters, they're so interlinked. Being from such a small country, and I know you touched on it at the top, but they played against each other so much. And they played against each other since they were 6 and 7 years old. So this is a rivalry, and they're two incredible players. They were always the number 1 and 2 players in the country. They progressed up the juniors. They had exceptional junior careers. And obviously they then transcended to be the number 1 and 2 players in the world, which it doesn't happen all that often. I can't think of any real examples of it off the top of my head in the wider sporting world, that you have 2 players who are so dominant at their country level and then at the international level. It's an amazing story.
They share so much, a homeland, a love for the sport at which they both excel. But what they cannot share is what they each desire most: Grand Slam championships and the number 1 ranking. They are both at stake today as they take the court together at the Australian Open.
We get to the match, ESPN broadcast. You can really tell what the music was like at the time. Bush, eh? There was a lot of like alt rock intro cuts,
a lot of
highlight pack music.
Yeah, a lot of word art, a lot of big 3-dimensional shapes to do the broadcast package. Lots of star wipes and that sort of stuff going on. You know, this is in 2004. And it feels like it was in 1970.
Yeah,
just watching
time ago.
Watching the quality of the broadcast and watching just everything, like just all of it looks like it's from a completely different era. 16 years ago, and sometimes we forget and we poke fun at things, but 16 years is a long time in the broadcast television world.
It's totally right. You could have told me this was recorded in the 50s with a color TV set and I would have believed you. I think Cliff Drysdale's jet black hair helped me believe that as well.
There's a character in Arrested Development that reminds me so much of Cliff Drysdale. It's the one who's held up by the big bodyguard character, and like when water gets washed through his hair, there's like black paint rolling down the back of his neck. That's how I felt about Cliff Drysdale. It's like if you put any water near his hair, you would just see black paint coming out.
Through the course of the match, Cliff would utter his, which are now classic, insane takes throughout, but he was joined by Pam Shriver.
Can we just talk about?
I would just introduce the rest of the crew because it's important here. He was joined by Pam Shriver, Mary Jo Fernandez, and Mal Washington, who was courtside. But the combination of Pam Shriver and Cliff Drysdale during this match, some of the most ridiculous things I've heard. We'll put the link to the match where we watched it in the notes here, so that you can check it for yourself. But
some of these things just they defy belief. Some of the things there is a couple of quotes in this as well. Mal Washington comes up with a dinger, a pure 2004 quote that would not be acceptable in 2020 at all when listening to this back. But to kick things off in the broadcast, Cliff Drysdale uncomfortably close to the two women that he's sitting next to. Very, very uncomfortable watching this in the booth. It looks like he's sitting on top of these two poor women who are desperately trying to get away from him.
The end of a recap of the tragic Monica Seles story in which she was stabbed on court during play, which is absolutely horrific, was Cliff Drysdale saying, well, I guess the guy got what he wanted because Steffi Graf went back to number one. And that was the end of the story.
And immediately following him saying, we don't want to remember this thing. And then in depth telling the entire audience about what happened about it.
Okay, so that's who we're dealing with in terms of the commentating team. But the match itself begins with this in mind, because I think, Bush, the important thing to remember for Kim Clijsters is the talk about her psyche and the fact that she's pretty mentally wounded by her last two attempts against Henin, which also came at the same stage of the tournament in which she kind of fell apart at the big moments. And you can hear the commentators repeatedly reference that throughout the opening set.
Definitely, yeah. And I went back and watched the US Open final between Justine Henin and Kim Clijsters. Similar surface, you would have to say. Australian Open probably a little quicker surface at this point in time, but also a hard court. And the first set, pretty close between Kim Clijsters and Justine Henin. Second set, it's an annihilation job by Justine Henin. And this is following also losing at the French Open, so she is yet to win a set in the final of a Grand Slam when she gets there. And they're talking about how there's a quote later on in this final where they talk about how the Kim Clijsters coaching staff says, at least this is what is referenced by the commentators, that this is the most important match of her career. I mean, for goodness sake, she's made 3 Grand Slam finals almost in a row. I think she's going to be fine. I think she's going to get back to more.
She's 20 years old as well.
I know, for goodness sake.
Right? I'm like, this is an outrageous claims to be making about, like, this is the death knell for Kim Clijsters' career. Henin looked fantastic in the first set. And I think you saw the full arsenal when it came to Justine Henin-Hardenne at that point, as she took on the name of her husband. Point construction, variety, serve that was incredibly consistent. I think you saw what made her such an intriguing player, Bush, and I know you were pretty captivated by going back and looking at how she played. Yeah,
I wax lyrical to you about Justine Henin.
Some shocking things were said in this WhatsApp message about. But I mean, hey, I have a tough time disagreeing, to be honest.
No one plays like her in the women's game. Just no one. And honestly, no one aside Roger Federer plays like her in the men's game either. Like, they are two peas in a pod when it comes to their style of play. And it's really exceptional to watch her hit a tennis ball. The timing of it's phenomenal, but this woman takes no guff from anyone. She is out there to, kick ass and hit winners. And we're allowed to win, et cetera, et cetera. You know the quote I'm trying to get to. She tries to hit a winner on every single shot. Her point construction is amazing, but she is so aggressive, so unbelievably gifted to be able to create the shots that she does. It's really amazing to watch.
And now set points. as one player's confidence diminishes, Clijsters, the other one grows. This is now the 5th straight set where that has been the story in major finals.
Henin takes the first set 6-3, makes it 7 consecutive slam final sets lost by Clijsters, just not helping the psyche argument. And it's much of the same in the second set. In fact, Henin is cruising up 4-2. It looks like this is going to be a rather pedestrian slam final, straight sets, done in well under an hour. And then we see Kim mount a phenomenal pushback, phenomenal defense from Clijsters to retrieve a smash. I think when you look at 20-year-old Kim Clijsters in terms of her game, the defense was the thing that stood out to me the most at that time. And you saw how just phenomenal she was in terms of anticipating where her opponent wanted to go. She fights all the way back, in fact, Bush. And I think at that time, you're thinking, this is easily Justine Henin's title right now. But Kim Clijsters really switched into a different level.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the 2 finals previously at the French Open and the US Open, it's a little different Kim Clijsters than we're used to seeing when we sit now, judging by her whole career, because this is a little bit more of a timid Kim Clijsters in terms of some of the shots that she's hitting. She's not as aggressive. You think of the things that get associated with her now, you know, brutal, aggressive, bludgeoning tennis, like will beat the living mercy out of you on a tennis court. She's being hit off the court, and she was hit off the court in the 2 finals previously to this. The match is entirely on Justine Henin's racket. She is hitting winners past her. She's basically constructing points all around Kim Clijsters, up to the point that it just falls apart. And one of the things that the commentators talk out at length about this, you mentioned consistency in serve. Justine Henin's serve is a weakness in the sense that she doesn't get a whole lot of first serves in, but her first serve is also her second serve.
It went completely absent, like it was gone at that point in the match, which it was shocking considering how well she was doing in the first set in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And I think she has a beautiful serve motion. I think they both do, actually. I think Kim Clijsters is underrated in terms of just, it's so metronomic. She just steps up there. It's like a big pendulum. She stands up and hits the piss out of the ball. It's really beautiful to watch, actually.
The famous open air saying has now been
the piss
trademarked.
It has, yeah. We should make t-shirts with that on.
So the argument about Clijsters being mentally wounded and remembering past failures, this argument now is being made about Justine Henin, who, coming up on the scene, had her own painful losses in which she was in a winning position, including the 99 French Open against Lindsay Davenport and a French Open semifinal against the very same Kim Clijsters. So now this argument's being brought back. To be fair to Henin, she was extremely young at that time. Like, she was just coming onto the scene. And at this point in the game in 2004, early 2004, she is on a different level in terms of where the women's competition is at. But going in the third set, it's a toss-up for me, Bush. I'm leaning Henin, but I could see it going either way.
It still felt like, to me, the match was entirely in Henin's favor. She was hitting all the aggressive shots. She was really controlling the rallies all over the place. And Clijsters was doing an exceptional job just clawing her way into the match and just trying to stay with a lot of these points. But I think the thing that really upped the game at the end of the second set was when she started being more aggressive. She started hitting more inside-out forehands into the backhand side of Justine Henin, and she got good success from it. When she started to be more aggressive, she started to see a little bit more of a breakdown, a bit more timidity from Justine Henin, and it worked to win those 4 games in a row, to come back and steal the second set. But really, you can't say from the position that she was in, like, she didn't deserve to win that second set. Yes, the level slightly dipped from Justine Henin, but I thought, conversely, that Kim Clijsters played pretty exceptional to get to that point.
Third set begins, Henin holds, Kim Clijsters serving at 0-1 as a ball called out, which was in on a break point.
We can come back to this. Will come up again, won't it? Don't worry.
Massive swing in the match in which Kim Clijsters is hard done by a bad call. Keep that in mind. We get a Cliff Drysdale Classic, a must-game win for Kim Clijsters down 3-0. That was a highlight, to be honest.
At some point, he is going to say in this match, so the player who wins the most games is going to win this match.
Waiting for it. The match is now clearly in Justine Henin's hands, and I think that choke narrative is still there, but it's about to be stamped out. You have Pam Shriver questioning what Henen's true colors are, which I thought was a bit much considering how well Henin had been playing in the last calendar year. But okay, like
2-time Grand Slam champion.
And then right after that comment is made, the camera pans to national hero golfer Greg Norman in Australia, and Shriver says, quote, "Somebody that knows about losing leads at majors." And I'm like, I thought Pam was one of the all-stars of this broadcast and the match entirely.
Followed by a very, very long, awkward silence in the broadcast.
It was shocking. I don't think anyone was prepared for that biting commentary. And she was right. It was great.
15 seconds or so of just pure silence.
You have to watch this. Oh, it's fantastic. Henin is serving at 4-2. Clijsters breaks. You could say it's another example of Henin getting tight. The 3-4 game now for Clijsters serving to get back on level terms goes to deuce. Clijsters can't close on multiple game points. You have a double fault, an error at net. And then, to me, the seminal moment of this match in terms of if you're in the camp of Kim Clijsters was screwed conspiracy. Clijsters, to be fair, I think mishits another put away at net, but this time it's in, only to be overruled by the chair umpire who says it's out. Yeah, now remember, there's no Hawkeye at this time. It's a massive call, Bush.
It's an astonishingly bad call. It's dreadful. I mean, you can make the case that it's close. It is definitely close. There's no way the chair umpire should be overruling at that situation at that point. And I think she is influenced. I think Justine Henin does throw up the hands. She does make the gesture that this is a long way out. It isn't, by the way. It's definitely in. It kind of catches the back of the line.
She made the symbol like, oh, that's considerably out. It was not.
It was definitely not. No, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's a bitter blow. Kim Clijsters does so well. The momentum's entirely with her. She's 3-0. She's 3-love down. Pulls this all the way back, and this game is so critical for her. She's 3-4 down. If she can pull it back to 4 each, who knows at that point? The momentum's clearly in her favor. She's going to go on and win it. And she has opportunities even within this game to close it out. And that's going to haunt her. That one will definitely haunt her. I'm sure she still thinks about that one.
Henin takes the game 5-3 lead and then, of course, closes it to win her third slam at that time and her third slam final win over Clijsters 6-3, 4-6, 6-3.
Game, 7 match, Henin-Hardenne, 2 sets to 1. 6-3, 4-6, 6-3. Thank you very much. I want to congratulate Kim for sure for a wonderful tournament she played again. She wasn't sure that she could play, and she did, and she fought a lot, so congratulations for this unbelievable tournament. It's a pleasure to play here in Australia. I love it, and I'll come back this for sure with the same pleasure. Thank you very much.
So where do these two players go from here? I mean, Bush, this is a pretty interesting time in women's tennis in terms of the players that would end up making pretty much the core of the tour and the people to beat pretty much wherever they went.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of sad and happy at the same time. There's a deal of Schadenfreude about the whole thing, looking at this match, knowing that they're 21 and 20 years of age at this point. And I genuinely believe, and I've said this to you before, I think if Justine Henin is in a slightly bigger frame, in a slightly bigger body, and someone who isn't as susceptible to injuries, I think she's the greatest player, man or woman, to ever live. I think she's that talented. And I think she would win 25 majors. I truly believe that.
Just want the listeners to know Simon told me he was preparing one of the biggest bombshells in open air history, but that's her. Wow. Okay. 25, only 25?
25. So she won 7 Grand Slam titles. She made 5 Grand Slam finals in addition to that she didn't win. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that if she had stayed healthy and not retired twice, she could have been in the low to mid-teens in terms of Grand Slam wins.
Henin would shockingly retire as the world number one in May of 2008, right before the French Open, a tournament she was expected to win. She was battling injury, but still, I think the decision at that time was a genuine shock and something that really shook the tour. In total, Justine Henin won 7 slams, Olympic gold in 2004, and spent a total of 117 weeks at world number one. She was the year-end number one in 2003, 2006, and 2007, and she made a return to the tour, and she says she was inspired by the likes of Roger Federer, who continued to play on and win that career Grand Slam with the French Open that made her want to come back. And she contested a fantastic Australian Open and final in 2010 against Serena Williams that won 3 sets. That was a great match as well, Bush.
The first major championship of 2010 will be decided in a deciding set. Anna against the defending champion Serena Williams. She rallies and takes the second 6 games to 3.
Yeah, one of the best of all time, actually. Interesting rivalry between Serena Williams and Justine Henin. It's one of those that just, it's very funny looking at them next to each other, just the size disparity to start with. It is, it's a monumental task for someone who is that small to try and beat someone who is just significantly superior physically. That's just the reality of it. But tennis is one of those things that if you have the ability, the shot making, the timing, you don't have to be enormous, but it does help sometimes. But an incredible final, one that I definitely encourage you to go back and see. I also recommend you to go back and watch the 2003 French Open semifinal between Serena Williams and Justine Henin, the infamous handgate situation where the entire French Open crowd and the French commentators are openly rooting against Serena Williams, which is has a series of problems in relation to it, but really, really interesting. And I really encourage you to go back and check that one out as well.
Kim Clijsters enjoyed a pretty remarkable few years, 15 years since this match in Melbourne in 2004. She split from Hewitt soon after this tournament and retired from tennis in May 2007. She got married, she had a daughter, and then decided to return to tennis, where she ended up winning the US Open in 2009, Bush, which at the time, and I think it still holds up, as one of the greatest returns to sport across the board. Doesn't matter what sport you're talking or what league.
I think it is, yeah. She's beloved in the tennis community just for the fight that she showed. I actually think I see quite a lot of comparisons between her and Serena Williams, a little like a light version of Serena Williams in a lot of ways. Very similar play styles, similar game styles. And I think it's after when she finally wins the Australian Open, when Clijsters finally wins it, she says she finally fulfilled her namesake as being Aussie Kim, which I thought was a nice touch, that she was aware of it enough that she can now call herself that after winning the title. But an amazing achievement to come back and win, especially given the early career negatives in terms of losing finals. It's an astonishing achievement to come back and be as successful as she was.
She returned to the tour, of course, most recently, and the coronavirus pandemic has derailed that comeback, but she looked pretty darn good in those few glimpses we got in early 2020. The pair would go on to repair their relationship. There was some press they did in the years that followed, and including when Henin came back as well. And I think they both cited the fact that they were really young. They were in a very interesting situation in terms of being from such a small country and having so much success. And I think Belgium tennis authorities not really knowing what to do. I mean, there's a lot of Fed Cup success there as well for them. So there's a long history there. But I think in terms of where you look at where the tour was at that time and who made up the upper echelon of it, the reason that era was so dominant and so difficult and so amazing, I think, is a big part is because of Justine Henin and Kim Clijsters, Bush. And you go back and you look at the matches that they've had in the past and also just watch them play other people as well. It's always a treat. It's, I think, an underrated rivalry and an underrated pair of players.
I really believe that's true, yeah. And I really also believe that era was the greatest era of women's tennis as well. Just the amount of big names that were at the top of the game is really astonishing. You look at that sort of 2002 to 2008-9 sort of period, you have the likes of Jennifer Capriati also competing at the top of the game. You have Lindsay Davenport. You have, of course, Serena and Venus Williams. You have Maria Sharapova. You have any number of players who continue to, play at the top of the game. And it was amazing to watch it. You also throw in names that were really, really strong and had good careers. Svetlana Kuznetsova as well. Jelena Jankovic. Like the list went on and on and on. There was exceptional players, and it was an incredible era to be playing in.
That was the 2004 Australian Open women's final. Bush, your parting thoughts from this match?
An incredible final, one which at the age of 20 and 21, I think it's cool to go back and look specifically at this moment in their careers, just how they were spoken of at that point in time. And I don't think anyone really had any knowledge about how this was going to pan out. We certainly had ideas about how both of these players would go on and achieve success in their careers. But I think it's a really good flashpoint and good moment to see just how exceptionally talented both of them were and competing at the top of the game. It's pretty amazing to see, actually.
When I think about why I like tennis and why I love watching this sport and playing this sport, I think it's the singular beauty of certain shots and certain things you see done in repetition. And I think Justine Henin's backhand was one of those shots for me. And watching this final again made me remember how clean it was, how automatic it was, how smooth the execution was. Because I think we're talking about all-time great shots. That backhand has to be up there, and it was a treat to be able to watch that again.
Definitely, and she's an astonishing mover on a tennis court as well. Easily top 5 mover on the women's game of all time. She's an exceptional. She has unbelievable feet. If there's any young girls out there watching, just specifically how she moves on a tennis court, it's really astonishing. And I think we're actually selling Kim Clijsters pretty short on this as well. Forehand, backhand, serve, technically like utterly superb. She's beautiful to watch on a tennis court as well. Different style, different aesthetically as well in terms of the way that the game is played and the way that we look at it, but no less successful and no less just beautiful in its own way.
Kim Clijsters got really good really quickly and was good for a very long time. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we didn't mention about this, the fact that she was hoovering up titles at that point in her career.
She was world number 1 already at that point.
She was winning so many titles. She was winning all of these like lesser tournaments.
She's unbeaten in 15 matches coming into this final as well. Well then, Simon, that was a pleasure. We'll do it again real soon.
We will. I'm looking forward to it. And this was a good one. Let's do more like this from this era. There's a lot of good matches that we need to touch on.
Please remember to like and subscribe to our podcast. Give a rating or review wherever you may find your podcasts. Open Era will continue during the hiatus of tennis and sports in general. If you have a suggestion of a match you would like us to cover, please hit us up at podcast@openera.ca or leave us a line on Twitter @OpenEraPod. For Simon and myself, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.